Well, welcome to the Illuminate podcast, Erica. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Geoff. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with you about EMDR. I'm a big fan of EMDR, even though I'm not trained in it. It's one of those things I've needed to, make time to go do. But I've been a client with EMDR. I've done my own EMDR work, so I'm familiar with it. And I refer a lot of my clients to practitioners who do it. And so I know enough to be dangerous, but I'm really excited to dive into it because I think a lot of people that I've talked to, clients that I've worked with, and I know people in our audience here, maybe haven't even heard of it before and don't even know what it's about. So I just am looking forward to diving in and trying to demystify this and normalize it and educate people on what this is as a resource. Because when you're dealing with addiction and trauma, you're needing something that can often go way deeper than just talk therapy. So
Absolutely.
do you want to just dive right in, Eric, and kind of in a nutshell tell us kind of what EMDR stands for, what it is, so we can get people on the same page here?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And then you have to go, whoo, because it sounds, even the title sounds a little intimidating to people, right? And so in breaking it down, what EMDR does. So it's a type of therapy that goes beyond traditional talk therapy. So a lot of traditional talk therapy, we're working on gaining coping skills to deal with distress, addiction, whatever's coming up, right? Human suffering. And that helps reduce that pain, manage it, cope with it. But a lot of the times, and for some people, it doesn't really get to the root cause of it. And so EMDR offers this kind of bottom-up approach to help people suffer less. And a metaphor that I like to use a lot of the time is, so it was formed by Francine Shapiro in the 80s, has a growing body of wonderful research on it. When it first came out, a lot of people were very skeptical, I believe. Mm-hmm. And now that we have all this research, it's really expanded. It's founded upon this notion that our brains and our bodies have a natural healing mechanism. So, and if somebody gets a physical injury, for example, all depends how serious it is, we're going to expect that that's going to take some time to heal. But eventually, in some way, shape, or form, we hope that that's going to heal. And the brain is part of the body. So the body has its own healing mechanism with assistance, right? The brain's going to do the same thing. So if you fall down and skin your knee, for example, ouch, sorry, that happened to you. And there's debris, there's gravel, there's dirt in that wound. We need to clean it up. We need to bandage it up. And then your body's going to start to work to heal that. You don't have to think intentionally, okay, send my blood vessels here and start to, work on itself and heal. We don't have to think about it. It happens. But what happens is that if we don't fully get those pieces of dirt, the gravel, the debris out, it's not going to be able to fully heal. And this is what happens when adverse experiences happen to people that may be inside their awareness or outside of their awareness, which we can touch upon. And that's like that's like the pieces of dirt. So what EMDR does is works to remove the debris that's blocking people's capacity to fully heal. That's one part of it. Mm-hmm. That kind of makes sense?
Yeah. And so when you talk about bottom up, you're essentially saying that like we're working with the body's natural drive to heal, and we're sort of unleashing that and getting the things out of the way that instead of trying to just like, when you say top down, you're basically saying through the cognition, through thinking, through thoughts, through talking, a lot of the times we're just walking around the debris and all that other stuff, and we never really get it out of the way.
Right. It's almost as if you think of a weed, if we're like trimming off the top of it, that's great because it's less there. But until we get down to the roots, understand what systems are connected to other roots and clear that out, it's going to keep coming back.
Yeah.
And you know, the eye movement part, right? So that's, what's this eye movement, portion of it involves a form of what we call bilateral stimulation, which is not as scary as it sounds. Because when I first heard that, I thought, like, are we talking about electric
Probes in the
shock?
brain.
Right? No, it's not that at all. It's not that at all. Bilateral stimulation in EMDR can be someone following a light, or now virtual, a dot, or somebody's fingers from left to right. It can be in the form of left to right tapping. There's lots of different forms. And what that does, it simulates the same type of eye movements in REM sleep, which is a natural process we already do. If we don't get REM sleep, we don't survive. And so REM sleep is like the digestive system for the brain. We keeps what nourishes us and discards the rest.
Oh, I love
If
that.
we eat, right? If we eat some gum, I don't know if that's true, if gum stays in your system for years, but let's just pretend it is.
When I was a
Or
kid,
an
it was
object.
7 years, Erica. It was 7
Right.
years. That's what
That's
I
what
was
I
told.
heard too. So we'll go with that. Let's go with that. If you eat a piece of gum or a hard object that a foreign object,
Yeah.
that's going to block that system from digesting properly. And so adverse experiences, trauma becomes those blocks. So when we activate that REM type eye movement when we're awake, obviously during session, that can help, that frees that block. So people become very, very quickly start to feel a lot less stress about things, start to come a more adaptive resolution to things. And the best part is you don't have to go into super detail about anything you don't want to.
Right.
It's not a requirement.
Right. And that's the one thing that I love about it, because the tendency, I think, just human nature, our reflex is, we'll just talk it out, right? Catharsis, just
Right.
talk through every detail. And what that essentially does is re-traumatizes the person to basically relive it without any sort of support or healing or anything that will actually resolve it. It just mostly they re-experience it without actual healing, right?
Right. And that's one of the parts of EMDR, is that it's based upon 8 phases. So it's a structured but flexible type of treatment. So it's not so rigid, because human beings are complex. We have many layers. We have lots of parts of ourselves. And so it's not cookie cutter, but it's a structured 8-phase model, but there's flexibility in it. And in those beginning phases, it's all of the prep work that's needed in order to get to the root causes of things and to do that work. So it's safe, that it's comfortable, that it's not re-traumatizing. Sometimes, unfortunately, I'll see clients that come to me and I'll introduce EMDR because I use it with almost every client I work with. And they'll say, oh, no, I've done that before, and that's not for me. I had a really bad experience. And I'll ask a few more. And what I'll learn is that it was somebody who was not following the proper protocol, or was not holding fidelity to the model, and didn't do it right. So we have to do some damage control with that. But it's safe, it's contained, it's not, if you're doing it right, it's not re-traumatizing, and there's prep work prior. So we're not going to go deep diving in the deep end. We're going to get really familiar with the shallow end and your floaties, and make sure you can do cool kick turns before flip turns before we can go there.
Yeah.
And you're always in control. The client's always in control.
Right. So the process is really, in a lot of ways, opposite of what the trauma was like, which was no control, no consent generally, overpowering their senses, generally, like, right, disorientation. There's just so many things about trauma that just really aren't part of regular life. It's an overwhelming experience. And so I love this. I mean, the trauma treatment, if you're going, for my listeners, if you're working with somebody who just wants to get in there and rip it out and just work through it, right, that's actually mimicking the exact same experience you probably had when you were traumatized, whether it was a natural disaster, car accident, interpersonal violence, personal, like, relationship betrayal, anything like that. Like, all those things are completely done without your input. And so the treatment has to be client led. Like you said, it has to be completely consensual, slow, and respectful and careful. And I love that, Erica. I love all the setup, the fact that, like, there's this runway that helps people kind of get up to speed before they can go in and do the deeper work. That's so respectful. And so, but it also is just ethical, right? We don't want to just hurt people.
Right. And sometimes, there's a huge, obviously, informed consent part of it. Sometimes I really have to check myself, because I'll be hearing someone, with such courage and bravery talk about what's bringing them into therapy. I start to share, like, hey, this is the type of therapy that I do, and this is why I think it could be helpful. And sometimes when they're sharing that, I'm holding space, but there's this part of me back here that's like, oh my God, this is going to be good. They have no idea how good it's going to get once we start working on this, the freedom that's going to pop up for them. So I have to make sure I'm not too eager to be like, woohoo, but because
right, because you know how good it can be for them. The relief and the freedom that they'll feel, that you've got this gift that you're going to help them get to, and they don't know it yet. So of course you've got to slow down and
right at the pace. It's collaborative.
Totally.
It's, there's always choice and there's always voice at any time. Even throughout the process, we're checking in with each other. If they want to change the pace of something or switch it, or, we've already worked on that set of rules and roles together about how we're going to work through this journey. So I'm kind of like the trauma recovery Sherpa. They're leading, they're doing the work with it. And I'm helping make sure that it's guided in the appropriate, safe, and effective way, so they have the best outcome possible.
I love it. Yeah, I love that. And I want to go back to something that you said, and it just kind of flowed out of you there. And I think it's important to go back and bracket it, which is, if your trauma treatment does not involve choice or your voice, right, it's not going to help you.
Run. That's not a trauma informed care at all. Right.
And really I believe any therapy, if you feel like you're going and seeking healing for anything and you don't feel like you have a voice in the process or a choice, that's not collaborative, and it's not going to be helpful. And so, I love that. Sometimes it's helpful to have things that rhyme, that are really succinct like that, to help us get really centered on what we're doing here. So thank you for that. I think that's fantastic. So EMDR, we talk about the bilateral stimulation. Can we talk about that for just a minute? Because I know when I went and did EMDR therapy, my therapist, she had these vibrating tappers that we would put in our hands, right? But they were broken that day. They were broken, and she never got them fixed. And so what she did is she pulled her chair close to me and she tapped on my legs. And she, of course, was like, "Can I tap your legs?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's fine. I don't care." Or she'd had me hold up my hands, and she would do like really gentle back and forth. And it was very soothing. I was very surprised when I did it, how soothing it was to have that rhythm going. can you talk, and you talked about the REM and kind of how our body does it, but what is working with that? Because whether it's our eyes moving back and forth, whether it's the tapping, whether it's the sound or the vibration or things like that, what is going on with that back and forth?
Yeah, there's a lot, the neurobiology behind it. There's so many different ways that people are interpreting it. So there's not, in other words, there is not yet one like, this is exactly how we know it works. There's lots of different things at play. And some of those are that the right hemisphere of our brain is more likely to hold negative patterns, associations, emotions connected to people, places, and things. And the left hemisphere of our brain is more likely to hold the more positive ones. And so when something distressing happens, and it can be a range. So we say trauma, even like a post-it note of that, the way I define, and other people, not just me, can define it, is any event or events that's overwhelmed your ability to cope. So we have the big stuff that's obvious, but then there's other things too, like that day in 6th grade where nobody would sit with you, and where did you go? And
Right.
so, yeah. And so we have the left and the right hemisphere of the brain, and the bilateral stimulation helps connect the two so that we're going from disturbing images, emotions, sensations in the body's belief about self, and it helps process over to something a lot more true, a lot more positive, realistic. So for example, I'm not safe, for a situation where they felt I'm not safe, or the past feels present, can then, with the BLS, bilateral stimulation, and the protocol, start to shift to, I'm safe now, I survived, a lot of variety of things. So that's one way
Yeah.
we think it works, is that it simulates like REM sleep. Another way is that it taxes the working memory. So when our brain becomes overwhelmed, the front part of our brain goes offline. It's like, well, I don't know if you shop at DSW, but it's your favorite website. I would say the DSW website for me, but it's your favorite website on Cyber Monday. It's overloaded with information, and it's too taxing, and it shuts down, right?
Yep.
And so the front part of our brain like goes offline too much. And so there's something about the bilateral stimulation that helps bring the front part of the brain online. And so we're attending to that. We're orienting to the therapist as well in the relationship, while the back part of the brain is letting go of any distressing material. Those are some ways it can work.
That's so cool. That's so cool. And
It's
I
really
know
cool.
that bilateral stimulation, am I allowed to call it BLS since I'm not an EMDR therapist? Is that okay?
Of course. They call it BLS, we call it DAS, dual attention stimuli. It's like so many different.
I just don't want to be a poser, Erica, so I'm just trying to be careful, with the jargon here. So with bilateral stimulation, it's really the bedrock of EMDR, right? That's a big part of it. That's going on as part. That's a big part of the healing mechanism, right? Is that
Yeah.
part of it? That's when that starts, and you're reprocessing trauma, you're working through stuff. That's active in the background, right? So people know that.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
And so how it typically looks, if we're working on, we identify a particular memory, for example, to work on, that is connected, a past memory that's connected in some way, shape, or form to the person's present pain. We will bring up the emotion in the moment, the body sensation, a negative thought about they're having about themselves connect to that. So we just activate that neural network that's stuck enough, not to overwhelm, but just enough to wake it up a little bit. And then we start doing the work with the BLS, and it desensitizes it. It brings it down from something that can be really disturbing to neutral.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Yeah,
In a
that's
short amount of
fantastic.
time,
Right.
which is good.
Right, exactly. This isn't something that you're going to have to sign on and do for, years. It's designed to be a short-term intervention, and it's effective in just a few sessions. Like, people feel a difference.
Yeah, it can range depending on, EMDR looks different depending on, of course, the person and what they're coming with. So
Yeah.
an individual with complex PTSD, for example, is not going to be an EMDR for just 6 sessions. It's going to be probably months or years. It depends on the person, how much stabilization they need for that. But typically, and the research shows that it's much more efficient, effective, and quicker treatment timeline wise than other forms of therapy. So somebody, for example, with we call a single event trauma, like a car accident, within I'm trying to think of the study now, it's on emdria.org, but it's like 75 to 90%, I believe, of the participants in the study of a single event trauma, I believe it was up to just 6 sessions, and they no longer met the criteria for PTSD.
That's
It's
fantastic.
gone. And that's one of my favorite parts. There's a lot of favorite parts of my work, but in the beginning, if I'm working with someone with PTSD, and EMDR helps with a lot more than PTSD, but if we assess for it and they meet the criteria, and then when we're towards the end of our work together, we'll do it again. And to see that, to just share that space with them, see, wow, this is where I was just a few sessions or a few weeks or a few months ago, and look where I am now, is so, so cool. It's the gold standard for PTSD. It will cure it. You don't have to live with it the rest of your life.
And that's just it. A lot of people feel like, well, this is just going to be a life sentence now that I've been through this awful thing. And it's like, no way. It is treatable,
Yeah, I wouldn't be doing this work if that weren't true. I'm not in the business of teaching people how to tolerate
Yeah.
suffering. Like,
Yeah.
you can tolerate pain and discomfort, like that's to be human, but not suffering.
Yeah.
You don't need to suffer.
Yeah. I love that. Right. And just because, maybe it didn't work with somebody else, like you're saying, there are protocols, and maybe it wasn't administered correctly, or maybe you didn't find the right practitioner or the right setting, or maybe even timing, right? I know sometimes people aren't ready, in life circumstances, or they're still in a trauma, whatever, but just stay with it, because there are solutions for this. It's not something that has to be a life sentence. I love that. People need to know that.
Right. Yes, that's if that's like my one message to the world as a therapist, it's like, it doesn't have to be a life sentence at all. People sometimes come to me, they've been dealing with things for decades. And to see that lift and release and transition, it's really cool. And sometimes they're even surprised too. If you've ever run on like a treadmill or gone really fast on a bike, and then you get off and you're like, oh, I'm so used to doing this motion. There's like okay, happening anymore.
Like, I don't have,
you just keep walking.
My internal system doesn't have to be like spinning all the time. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Right. Yeah.
And so it sounds like too, I know that, I see this a lot. I do a lot of emotionally focused couples therapy. That's a lot of what I work with. Couples that have come in with injuries and stuck issues that for decades, and we can work through them, and there's no expiration date on it, because they're living it in the present. So it's the same with trauma, right?
Right.
Like, it doesn't matter if it happened in 1960, it's still active in your body, and you're going to treat it in the present.
Right. Yeah. And this happens, any unresolved trauma, distress, wounding is, if not attended to, is going to show up in our relationships. It's going to show up in our most important relationships, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's, getting to being able to attend to those younger parts that experienced that hurt and pain from the past. So the past isn't becoming present. So like, I kind of joke with my husband sometimes, like, oh, I'm sorry, that was my 17-year-old self coming out during that argument. Adult me is back online now, right? But sometimes like people's inner children
Totally.
or teenagers are duking it out, So that's.
I know. Yeah, exactly. We're definitely filled with layers, aren't we? And experiences, and
Yeah.
and so some surprise us,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, oh, I guess we've got to do some work there. What else?
I see this a lot. Oh,
Yeah.
go
No.
ahead.
I just,
Jose.
what else? I'd love to hear what else with the EMDR for you is would be helpful for the audience in terms of understanding how it works, demystifying it.
Right. And so a lot of the words that people, I can share some of the words, how people describe it, their experience of it, and a little bit of, well, how do you get to the root issues? Because sometimes people come in, they're like, I experienced this trauma, I experienced this thing, and I'm having problems with it now, and this is what I want to work on. And like, they're very clear on it. Sometimes it's, I keep fighting with my partner and I keep shutting down in conversations, or I keep, my boss, I'm having issues with my boss and it's not so obvious. And so some of the things that people use to describe it is that once we work on a memory, or we work on, when EMDR land, we call it a target, that memory feels like it's underwater. People have said that it's, there's no emotional charge left to it. And so they may start with, for example, somebody I had worked with in the past who experienced a car accident, in the moment was feeling like, I'm going to die. I feel like I'm going to die all the time. Car accident was over.
Yeah.
Over, right? And then after EMDR ended with really, really solidly, my will to live is greater than my fear of dying, and I'm here now. And just confidence, wasn't being pulled back in the past from it. Also help with relational trauma, betrayal trauma, where somebody's is carrying around a belief that I'm not good enough, I can't trust other people, I can't trust myself, or I'm alone. That's a big one. And so with EMDR, we start to work with, desensitize, and process those core beliefs and the memories connected to them, to translate it and update it to, instead of I'm alone, I am loved, and I'm able to spend time with myself, or I'm connected. Instead of I'm not good enough, I'm worthy of love. That's my birthright. I don't have to earn that. It's my birthright. I say that a lot in session to people.
Yeah.
Instead of I'm not good enough, I'm okay as I am. I'm okay as I am. And have that really, really be firm and just on a visceral level of how they're feeling with that. So we create a new neural connection in the brain. So once EMDR won't take away anything you need, but it will soften and discard everything that's not supposed to be there because it was misfiled.
I love that. It won't take away anything you need. So if there's a fear that people have that's going to change me, I'm not going to be the same person, you're just saying, no, it's actually going to, it's going to sort things out and help actually optimize your whole system.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
A lot of people who describe themselves as like type A personalities, for example, like high achieving, really driven, really organized, type people that sometimes they'll be reluctant, and usually in there's some perfectionism, and they'll be afraid, well, is this going to take away my drive to be successful? Is this going to take away this part of my personality that has a lot of grit and stamina? No, you need that, but it will sure as heck soften the rest that's causing you suffering, so you can get some breathing room.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you'll probably do everything you're going to do with more clarity and more focus, and
Yep.
you might even be kinder.
Right. Right.
Right.
Right.
Because
Right.
when that suffering
Yeah.
is going on, it can be hard to be patient and to make space for
Yes.
yourself and other people. So this is, you're not
Yeah.
fighting something all the time.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's so
Yeah.
powerful. I love to hear I love to hear your examples of what it looks like pre and post, and what it's capable of doing, and giving people hope that the things that they maybe thought they just have to live with, um,
Right.
that, because I think we can get really dismissive. I just think that a lot of the times it's kind of like, well, suck it up, or it could be in a baby, or you don't have to fix everything, or sometimes you just deal with stuff, like these things we do to dismiss it and really bypass, um, that's just not necessary. We don't
Right.
have to live like that. Yeah.
Right. And it's in a thing that's important for people to know is you don't have to wait until you are just at the end of your rope to
Right.
seek help. EMDR is
Right.
not, EMDR will help people absolutely who are in a tremendous amount of um, pain. And it will also help people that are looking to understand their personality, relationships, and patterns more. It does not have to be like wildfire and it's only for that. There's a continuum, there's a spectrum. It works great for athletes, for performance enhancement, for business people, for artists. It can help with that too.
Yeah, I love
So
that. Yeah, I love that, because like you said, if it's the digestive system, right? The REM, the eye movement, the bilateral is really sort of helping us kind of move things through. I mean, my goodness, how much stuff do we collect on a daily basis?
right.
Unhelpful thoughts and negative experiences, and self-defeating beliefs, and I mean the list goes on and on. We just collect so much,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you know, debris that we have to clean it out. And um, yeah, that's fantastic. And I know that bilateral stimulation, just as a standalone, without any therapist guided treatment, is really beneficial. I mean, I remember you posted something on Instagram a few days ago, where you just talked about, all the different ways that you get bilateral stimulation in your life through, I think you framed it from a triathlon perspective, and you said, I get to the pedaling obviously is, by pedaling, swimming, and the running, the back and forth movement, and how there's just something very therapeutic about having that left and right movement, in
Right.
our lives all the time. Can you say more about that?
Sure. Yeah, we see it in nature too, or with animals. If you think about, cats, how they
Hmm.
kind of need their paws left and right, and so that it can be soothing in that way, any repetitive motion in that way. If you don't swim, bike, or run, that's totally cool too. Walking. You think about when we dance, if you just start going like this, like I feel even happier just doing this, right? Or how you sway a baby. So any left, right in that way can help support the nervous system. An
Yeah.
important part of it is that nobody can or should try to do EMDR on themselves, because sometimes people will Google and there's some not great stuff out there of like self EMDR, because there's some risk with certain populations who are high, that have really really high levels of dissociation. BLS can be detrimental if not done in the correct way. So I'm not saying don't go for a walk. That's I'm not saying that part, but any self-administered type of that,
Yeah.
Or trying to do that, that's my caution statement, because there's much more with that entails EMDR. But the natural forms of BLS, absolutely. Drumming, for example, I asked for a drum for Christmas. I hope Santa brings it. And even piano playing. So
Yeah, I love
that
that.
brings.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
yeah, your caution statement is important, to not assume that because we're talking about bilateral stimulation that you can now do a focused effort on yourself to heal your trauma directly through
Right.
doing that. What we're talking about is just the
Mhm.
natural rhythms that can, just like you said, I love the way you put it, just that can support our nervous systems, which we all can benefit from. And so
Right.
I'm mostly, yeah, just wanting to let the listeners know, you can just slow down and notice in your regular life the ways that left right movement feels supportive to you, and
Right.
then doing that in a focused, therapeutic, supportive way with professional help, going toward a target and really working through something that will be the foundation of it. And that's why
Right.
it becomes so safe, is because we already experienced that, we already are familiar with it.
Yeah. Yep. I teach a lot of people, and there's tons of resources too of people, demonstrating. Emdria.org is like the go-to resource for EMDR. But the butterfly hug, we call it, and you
Yeah.
can use it, with littles and adults. And so that's a form of BLS and can be really soothing. I always say, if you start doing it and things start to turn up and it get work, like stop, don't do that anymore. But that's a small risk in it. But all in all, it can be really stabilizing, containing, soothing, especially if you got some good music going on with it as well.
Yeah, you can actually Google bilateral music and put on headphones. I've done that before when
I use it.
when I'm doing a writing project, or when I really need to like go
Mm-hmm.
through something stressful. Like I'll put on the bilateral music, you hear the ocean and the movie, and it's like back and forth, and it's like my whole system just goes, yes, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's right. It's a natural process. So
Yeah.
EMDR is this, hopefully in demystifying that part. It's the HD version of, trauma recovery work, in that we're activating the natural healing mechanisms that are already within you. We're just bringing them out and guiding them along in the best way possible.
Yeah, this is fantastic. Thank you for educating. I'm sure the listeners, people may have questions about, well, how would this apply in my situation, or what are the exact steps, or what does it involve? Are there resources or places people can go to learn more about it as they consider whether this is right for them in their treatment?
Sure. Yeah. So I mentioned, so emdria.org, that's the EMDR International Association, emdria.org, has a plethora of research. Some people are really interested in the research part of it. It explains the 8 phases in a non clinically jargon type of way, which is great.
Yeah.
And there's tons of resources there. If you can also, Getting Past Your Past is a book that I often recommend to clients, by Shapiro, who explains EMDR, but walks you through some of the steps, kind of on your own too, if you're really wanting to take a deep dive and learn more about it. I think that's part of the, your informed choice on things if you want to learn more about it, because there's so much to learn. Those are two really reputable resources when it comes to that.
And does that
Yeah.
website also have a therapist directory?
Yeah. So yes. So EMDRIA has a therapist directory. There's different levels of training or certification. So it will have on there people who've completed the basic training, people that are certified, people that are in the process of becoming consultants, and then individuals like myself who are approved EMDRIA consultants. And then there's trainers on there as well. So that's a great resource. In Connecticut, we have a CT EMDR therapist website where we're all listed by our specialties and
Okay.
listed in that way. But EMDRIA is like the hub of a lot of where we are.
So if
And some of the
go ahead.
and some of the therapist directories too, like Psychology Today or Therapy Den are two pretty well-known ones, where people will be able to, you can search by specifier of EMDR therapist, and, you know, don't be afraid to ask how long have you been practicing?
Right.
You know, what type of clients do you have experience working with, to see if it's a good match.
Yeah, so a therapist who's trained in this would have it on their website, have it in their bio. You'd be able to, you know, it's an easy way to sort. And then you're saying there's some additional questions you definitely want to understand. If you feel like, you know, I don't want somebody who's only completed like the basic level of it. I need somebody who really has experience in this or mostly does this kind of work. You get to obviously decide that, and it's important to ask those questions and have the therapist, you know, just educate you on what they're doing with it, because like you said, not everyone's created equal in terms of how they apply it, how they do it.
Right. And there's a lot of amazing therapists that, you know, highly skilled therapists that are going, you know, that are in their basic training now and work great with clients, because we start working with clients almost immediately. If somebody's coming in that, you know, has a lot more complex problems to address, that may be a better fit with somebody who has naturally more experience with that. But that was the great thing about there's an awesome wave of therapists going through now through their basic training and certification, the digital natives of the EMDR world, because we all went online in March. And so this wave of new therapists are really incredible, being able to navigate through this, and the creativity is amazing that's come out of it. So they're a great group.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, and I also am thinking back on my, you know, I mean, I had been a therapist for 10 years when I went back and started to study with Sue Johnson and her team on emotionally focused therapy. And here I was, you know, by all accounts, a pretty seasoned clinician, but I was a beginner working with emotionally focused couples therapy, but I was getting a lot of supervision. I was getting a lot of support. I was getting, and so any cases I had all my 10 years of clinical reflexes and experience, but I also was working with this new model and having a back end support from supervisors and colleagues. And so people can be in good hands. You just got to ask good questions and figure out if that's the right fit for you and what support they have as well from you.
Yeah. Do you work with a consultant? Do you get supervision? That we all, in the EMDR community, we're very, very pro saturated, heavy in a good way with consultation. We love to provide consultation, seek it, and get together and support one another. So there's a really, really good backbone of consultation and supervision in the EMDR realm. Yeah.
Well, this is fantastic. Thank you, Erica. Hopefully this has been educational for all of you listeners about EMDR and giving you another option for your own healing. And so I'll put links to the websites that she mentioned in the show notes so you can check that out. But thanks again, Erica. Sure appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.